how do we get there? Everybody knows that a T-bone comes from a cow, but very few people know where it comes from in the cow. And I'm going to tell you. How do we get there? First things first. We've got to turn our cattle into a carcass. So how do we do that? That happens when a farmer brings his cow to a butcher shop. Once it's inside the butcher shop, it will be stunned. Once it's stunned, it's bled, the feeder cut off, and the head is cut off. It's laid down, and then the skin will be removed. Once the skin is removed, they will take hooks that are on trolleys and stick them in the back legs and hang them by the ligaments. Once it's on the hooks, it's lifted into the air, and once it's lifted into the air, it is gutted. Once it's been gutted, they will use a machine called a splitting saw, and that will split the carcass directly down the spine. Now the reason that they do that is because an entire carcass is too hard to move around. So it has to be split and broken down just a little bit to move it from one area to another. The first area is into a hot carcass cooler. Once in there, it stays in there for 24 hours. This will bring the temperature of the carcass down, and it will start cooling it down. From there, it will go into a bigger cooler, and inside the bigger cooler, it will stay in there between 10 and 12 days depending on the weight. Once it's in there, it is solidifying and the proteins will start breaking down, making it more tender, plus any water or excess blood will drain off of it in that time. Then you'll pull it into the processing room. What do we do once we get to the processing room? That's when we're going to turn our carcass into primals. Now, as I said, it's hanging from the hind legs, so the chuck and the neck are closer to the ground, closer to you. So your very first cut is going to be between the 5th and 6th rib. Going up, you're going to make a straight horizontal cut right across there. That's going to be your first primals. Those are 2 primals that you actually cut right there, about a third of the way over on the brisket side. So you'll have your brisket and your shank, and then on the other side you're going to have your chuck. From there, the carcass is more manageable. So with it being more manageable, you lay it down onto your cutting table. Once it's flat, you're going to make your next cut. The next cut is going to be right here, right before the very first rib. So you're going to have the rib is going to stay on the other side. You'll make your cut, and then you'll have 2 pieces there. That is going to be your plate and your rib loin. After you move them out of the way, your next cut is going to be coming from up here. You're going to cut right in between the tailbone and the hip bone. You're going to cut at a diagonal. That's going to leave this area right here, and that is actually your short loin. What's going to be remaining there is just a long piece of the back leg and a little piece of the hip bone. That is the round. So now that we've got all of our primals, that would be the chuck, brisket, shank, rib, loin, round. What comes after that, after we've broken it down into our primals? We're going to get cuts. Now, each primal has multiple options on what you can get. I don't have enough time to go over every single one of them, so I'm going to give you the more popular ones. First things first, we're going to talk about the brisket and the shank. So the brisket and the shank are actually 2 separate things. You'll actually cut the shank off right underneath the armpit almost, and then you'll be left with your shank and your brisket. You take the bone plates off right there and you have your brisket. There's not a lot you can get from a brisket except for the brisket itself. Some people do get stew or chili, but mostly it's brisket or hamburger. Secondly, you've got your shank. Now from your shank, you can get soup bone, marrow bones, and pot roast is a really popular from that area. Some people call it arm roast. Now secondly, we've got our chuck. The chuck is most commonly chuck roast, but also people get chuck eye or chuck steak. Following that, we've got the most popular loin, and that's our rib loin. From the rib loin, you're going to get your most common things, which are rib eye. You can also get tomahawk steak, which are very popular, and Delmonico's are really popular. They're all the same piece of meat, but the way that you cut it determines on what kind of steak it's called. Next up, we've got our plate. Now, the plate is just essentially all of the ribs. So you can get different variations of the rib, from flanken style rib, short rib, or riblets. Next, you've got your short loin. Now, the short loin's got the most popular type of steak there is. It's even the emoji on your phone. So that's going to be your T-bone. Now, if you don't like the bone, you can take out the bone, and on one side you've got tenderloin, and the other side you've got your regular loin. The tenderloin makes filet mignon, and the other side makes top loin, or New York strip is also a popular name. Following that is the sirloin. The sirloin really is just for sirloin steak. Some people get fajita meat. It's a very lean, very tender piece of meat. The very last piece is your big back leg. Now right here, you'll make the cut you'll make the cut right behind the rib bone, and it'll be your short ribs, or your rump roast, sorry. And behind that is just the round. So the round, you can get bottom round flat, short loin, bottom round flat, inside round, or eye of the round. But the most popular piece of cut from there is actually tenderized round steak, which is the most popular cut in Oklahoma, which is the chicken fried steak. Now that we've got all the cuts down, we've made it to the table. So, as a reminder of how we got to the table, we start off with turning our cattle into carcass, our carcasses into primals, and our primals into cuts. Now that you know all the cuts, you can use it as a party favor if you want. Tell all your friends that you know where the cuts come from, or maybe you'll never use the information, but I think it's interesting information to have. Thank you.
And there's my audience.